Hey, my name is Samantha Keller. I'm 26 years old, and this is the story of how my own mother tried to ruin me in front of the entire family, until the moment my assistant walked in with champagne and exposed a truth that changed everything. It started in a warm August afternoon in Raleigh, North Carolina, the kind of day where the sun scorches the pavement and the air hums with cicadas. I had just stepped out of a morning meeting with investors, still wearing my sharp navy blazer and heels that pinched my toes, but made me feel powerful. From the outside, my life probably looked picture perfect. But behind the scenes, there was one person constantly trying to rewrite my narrative, my own mother. For as long as I could remember, my mom had this obsession with appearances, not in a shallow way, like fashion or makeup, but in control. She wanted to control the narrative of our family. She needed people to see us as polished, pristine, successful, and anyone who deviated from that, well, they became her personal project. Or worse, her shame. I was raised with 3 brothers, all of whom followed the paths she laid out for them: accounting, engineering, and law. I, on the other hand, had dreams that didn't fit her mold. While they were climbing the corporate ladder, I was in college designing marketing strategies and daydreaming about owning my own business. And eventually, I did it. I opened a creative agency downtown. Small at first, mostly freelancers and chaotic energy, but it was mine, my vision, my life. But to my mother, it wasn't a real job. When she heard the word entrepreneur, she rolled her eyes. To her, I was unemployed unless I had a 9-to-5 and a pension plan. It didn't matter that I had contracts with major clients or that my agency was growing fast. In her eyes, I was the outlier, the embarrassment. Before I dive deeper into this part of my story, I want to pause and ask you something. Drop your name and where you're listening from in the comments. I want to know who's out there walking this path with me, because what I'm about to reveal, it's not just a story. It's a truth so raw, so personal, that only those with real courage will keep listening. Maybe you felt dismissed, silenced, or betrayed like I did. And maybe, just maybe, hearing what happened to me will help you find your own voice. So don't forget to like and subscribe, because this journey doesn't end in pain, it begins in power. So when she invited me to the annual Keller family reunion, a day-long event at my parents' lake house where distant cousins suddenly became critics, I knew what I was walking into. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the scene she had orchestrated. The first red flag came when she texted me the night before the reunion. Just wear something casual. You don't need to dress up this year. I should have known. My mom never left wardrobe to chance. She planned outfits like she planned menus, strategically. I ignored the text and showed up in a fitted blouse, tailored slacks, and the confidence of a woman who had signed 3 clients that week. When I pulled up to the lake house, I noticed the parking lot was full, more than usual. There was a huge white tent out back, fairy lights strung across the deck, and an open bar. My mom had gone all out this year. I stepped inside and was greeted with that familiar mix of laughter, grilling meat, and passive-aggressive questions about my love life. I made my rounds, hugged my Aunt Claire, dodged Uncle Pete's conspiracy theories, and even managed to chat with my cousins without anyone asking when I'd get a real job. For a moment, I thought maybe this year would be different. But then came the microphone. At every reunion, my mom made a toast. And she was good at it. Charming, witty, full of Southern grace. She always used that moment to boast about the family. Last year, she talked about my brother's promotion and my cousin's engagement. I figured this year would be no different. She clinked her glass. The crowd gathered. I stood by the drinks table, sipping sparkling water and bracing myself. "My beautiful family," she began. "I'm so proud of each and every one of you. Our clan just keeps growing, professionally and personally. This year, we have a new lawyer in the family, a soon-to-be architect, and our dear Samantha, who is, well, finding herself." I froze. There were chuckles, murmurs. I felt heat rise to my face. "She's exploring different paths," my mom continued, that patronizing smile painted across her lips. "It's a time of transition for her, but we all know she'll land on her feet." Applause. More murmurs. Someone even whispered, "Poor thing." I was humiliated. She didn't just imply I was jobless, She practically announced it, like I was some drifting millennial trying to find my purpose by journaling in coffee shops. She erased every hour I'd worked, every client I'd secured, every dollar I'd earned, because in her world, if she couldn't define it, it didn't count. I took a deep breath, walked away from the crowd, and stood near the edge of the deck, trying not to cry. I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need their approval, but I did. Or maybe, more than anything, I needed hers. That's when I got the text. It was from my assistant, Jordan. "I'm pulling up with the delivery. Should I bring it to the back?" My heart thudded. I had forgotten. Earlier that week, we landed a major branding deal with a luxury skincare brand. It was the biggest contract we'd ever signed. Jordan had suggested we celebrate, and I told him to surprise me. Apparently, the surprise was about to walk right through my mother's carefully curated party. I texted back, "Come through the gate. Bring it." A few minutes later, a sleek black SUV pulled up by the fence. Heads turned. Jordan stepped out, tall, confident, and dressed like he just stepped off a runway. He was holding a silver ice bucket, a bottle of champagne chilled inside. He walked toward me with a grin. "Congratulations, boss," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. The music had lowered. Conversations paused. He handed me the bottle and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was the signed contract from the client. He held it up like a trophy. "Just thought you might want to show your family that you do, in fact, have a job. And one hell of a business." I didn't plan what happened next. I popped the champagne right there on the deck, foam flying. The crowd gasped, and I raised my glass. "To new beginnings," I said, "and to redefining success. On my terms." The silence was golden. I locked eyes with my mom, who was standing by the patio door, lips pressed tight. For the first time in years, she didn't have anything to say, but I did. And that was only the beginning. The champagne tasted sweeter than anything I had ever had, not because of its brand or the bubbles, but because of what it represented. Validation, vindication, the truth, poured into a glass and raised in front of the very people who had just been laughing at my supposed transition period. But the sweetness didn't last long. As the last bubbles fizzled out in my flute, I noticed the look on my mom's face, like she had just been slapped in front of a crowd. And in a way, she had. Not by malice, but by reality. For a woman who built her world around control, nothing was more dangerous than the truth slipping out of her grip. She didn't say anything at first. She turned on her heel and disappeared into the house. I thought maybe she was embarrassed, maybe even ashamed. A small, bitter part of me hoped she was. I stayed outside with Jordan for a while. People came over, congratulated me, asked what the contract was about, and I told them with pride. I wasn't just a dreamer with a laptop. I was a CEO. I had an office downtown, a team, clients across the country. I had earned my place. But the tension wasn't gone. It was only shifting. Later that evening, as the sun began to dip behind the trees and the lake shimmered in gold and pink, I went inside to grab my purse. My mom was in the kitchen, alone, wiping down an already spotless counter. She didn't look at me when I walked in. "You embarrassed me today," she said quietly, not turning around. I stopped mid-step. "Excuse me?" "You know exactly what I mean," she said, finally looking up. Her eyes were sharp, glittering with something darker than disappointment. "You made a scene." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I made a scene? You stood in front of the entire family and told them I was unemployed. I said you were transitioning. You said I was trying to find myself like I was some lost teenager. You humiliated me." Her mouth tightened. "You don't understand how people talk, Samantha. What they think. I was protecting you. If they believe you're chasing some pipe dream..." "It's not a dream," I snapped. "It's a business. A real, thriving, growing business. Just because it doesn't look like the life you imagined for me doesn't make it any less real." She stared at me for a long moment, then went back to wiping the counter. "It's not stable," she muttered. "It's not safe. Neither is trying to win your approval," I shot back. She froze, and in that moment, the air between us cracked wide open. We had been having versions of this fight for years, disguised as debates about choices, as disagreements over lifestyle. But this was the raw truth. She didn't believe in me, because she didn't want to believe in the life I had created without her blueprint. It wasn't just disappointment. It was rejection of anything she couldn't control. I left the kitchen without another word. I should have felt satisfied, but I didn't. Not really, because as much as I hated her disapproval, it still hurt. She was my mother, and part of me had always held on to the hope that one day she'd look at me with pride instead of pity. The days after the reunion were quiet. No texts, no calls. I focused on work, poured myself into the new campaign we were designing for the skincare brand. It was bold, sleek, unapologetically feminine, exactly the kind of project I had dreamed of when I started. But even in the moments of victory, there was a hollow space in my chest. I told myself it didn't matter. That success was its own reward. But it did matter. It always had. 2 weeks later, I got a call from my brother, Daniel. He was the closest to me in age, and the only one in the family who didn't treat me like an alien for not wanting a desk job and a mortgage at 25. "I just got off the phone with Mom," he said. "She's spinning again." "About me?" "She's telling people you staged the whole champagne thing, that the contract isn't real." I closed my eyes. "Of course she is. She's saying you paid that guy, Jordan, to show up and play assistant." I almost dropped the phone, the sheer audacity of it. Not only was she unwilling to accept the truth, now she was rewriting it. I felt a fury rise in me that I hadn't allowed myself to feel at the reunion, a fury that came from years of being minimized, dismissed, controlled. "I'm done," I said quietly. "I'm not playing her game anymore." "You sure?" "More than sure." That night, I opened my laptop and began drafting an email. Not to her, to the family. I wasn't going to fight her in whispers anymore. I was going to let them hear the truth directly from me. In the email, I told them who I was. Not Samantha, the drifting daughter, but Samantha Keller, founder and creative director of SK Strategies, with a client portfolio including national campaigns, a growing team of 5 full-time employees, and projected earnings that would double by the end of the year. I attached a link to our website, a few press clippings, and even a behind-the-scenes video from our last project. I didn't mention the champagne. I didn't have to. The work spoke for itself. I hit send at midnight. The next morning, my inbox was flooded. Aunts, cousins, even my dad, who rarely got involved, wrote back, apologizing, congratulating, expressing shock and admiration. A few said they had always believed in me, but didn't know how to say it. Others admitted they had been misled. One even offered to connect me to a colleague in corporate partnerships. But there was no reply from my mom. I didn't expect one, until the package arrived. 3 days later, a box showed up at my office with no return label. Inside was a framed photo of me at 6 years old, standing in front of a lemonade stand with a crooked sign that said 25 cents. Next to it was a note, her handwriting. "You always did know how to run a business. I just didn't know how to accept it." No apology, no explanation, but it was something, a crack in the wall. I placed the photo on my desk, not as forgiveness, but as a reminder. This war wasn't over, and I wasn't done yet, because there's one thing my mother never understood about me. I don't need approval to succeed. But if you try to rewrite my story, I'll publish the truth myself, and that's exactly what I plan to do. A week after the package arrived, I found myself staring at that framed photo every morning, as if the past version of me, the 6-year-old with wild hair and a crooked lemonade stand, was silently cheering me on. It reminded me that my roots and ambition ran deeper than my mother's control ever could. But just when I thought I had found a sense of peace, the ground beneath me shifted again, and I realized this wasn't just about validation anymore. This was about truth, exposure, and something far darker buried beneath the surface of my mother's obsession with appearances. It started with a call from one of our newer clients, a boutique jewelry brand based in Charlotte. We had just launched a rebranding campaign for them and were scheduled to present the final analytics on a Friday morning. But when I answered the call, their tone was strange, cold, hesitant. "Samantha, we were reviewing some background materials about your agency and, well, there are some things we found that concerned us." I sat upright in my chair. "What kind of things?" There was an email from a source claiming to be a former employee. They said your agency is unstable, that you've falsified client wins, and that you're operating under questionable leadership. I felt my blood run cold. Can you send me the email? They hesitated. Out of respect, I think you should see it. Yes. But we're postponing the meeting until further notice. After the call ended, I sat frozen for a minute. Then my fingers flew across the keyboard, refreshing my inbox. A few seconds later, it arrived. Anonymous sender. No signature. But it was detailed. Scarily detailed. It mentioned specific contracts, timelines, even personal notes about our office culture. It was the kind of email that could only be written by someone close, or someone with access to someone close. I called Jordan immediately. He read the email in silence on his end, and when he finally spoke, his voice was steady. This wasn't a random attack, he said. Who would even know this stuff? I already knew the answer. My mother. She had asked questions before, casual ones, disguised as interest. During a family brunch, she'd once asked who handled our invoices. During another call, she'd asked how many clients we signed in a quarter. At the time, I thought she was finally taking interest in my work. But now I saw it differently. She had been collecting ammunition. The idea that she would go as far as to sabotage my career wasn't just painful. It was terrifying. What kind of person does that to their own daughter? But I couldn't accuse her without proof. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I asked for help. Jordan reached out to a tech contact he trusted, someone who specialized in digital forensics. Within 2 days, we had a trace. The IP address from the email was linked to a private Wi-Fi network registered under my parents' address. It wasn't just a guess anymore. It was fact. My hands shook when I held the printed report. It was one thing to suspect malice. It was another to see it spelled out in numbers and dates and black and white confirmation. Still, I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. Because something deeper had started to gnaw at me. Why? Why would a mother destroy her daughter's credibility in the most public, professional way possible? What was she trying to gain? I went to visit my father. We weren't close, not in the emotional sense. He was a quiet man who spent more time fixing old clocks in the garage than engaging in any of the family drama. But he saw everything. He always had. He welcomed me into his workshop like he had been expecting me. As gears clicked and soft jazz played in the background, I laid out the report on his workbench. He looked at it for a long time without saying a word. Then he sat back, exhaled deeply, and finally spoke. She's been afraid of this day since you were 15. I frowned. What day? The day you surpassed her. He paused the music, and the sudden silence felt heavier than the truth he was about to spill. Your mother never wanted children, he said slowly. Not at first. But she married into a family that expected it. So she did what she was taught. Smile, bake casseroles, host reunions, and pretend she was fine. But deep down, she was bitter. She gave up her own career dreams when she got pregnant with Daniel. And by the time you came along, she had buried those dreams so deep, she couldn't even look at you without feeling like something had been stolen from her. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. She resents me, I whispered. He nodded. And herself. But mostly, she resents that you dared to succeed where she gave up. It's not about your business, Sam. It's about what it represents. Freedom, defiance, power. I sat in silence, staring at the report again, but now through a different lens. This wasn't just revenge. It was projection. Every move I made toward independence reminded her of the cage she never broke out of. I don't know what to do, I said quietly. He handed me an old photo, her graduation picture. She was smiling, confident, full of hope. Remind her who she used to be, he said. It sounded noble, almost poetic, but I wasn't convinced. Still, I took the photo with me and drove straight to her house. I didn't call. I didn't text. I walked through the front door like I was 16 again, furious and determined. She was in the living room, folding laundry, as if she hadn't tried to sabotage her daughter's entire reputation. When she saw me, she didn't flinch. I suppose you're here to gloat, she said. I threw the report on the table. I'm here because you crossed a line. She looked at it, her eyes scanning the first page. Then she closed the folder and stood up. And what are you going to do, Samantha? Tell everyone your own mother tried to destroy you? Do you think that will make you look strong? or just pathetic. Her voice was like ice, sharp and clean and merciless. I pulled the graduation photo from my bag and held it up. "Do you even remember her?" I asked. "The woman who had dreams, who believed in something before she gave it all up." Her jaw tightened. "I don't need a lecture." "No," I said. "But maybe you need a mirror." She snatched the photo from my hand and threw it on the couch. "Your success isn't real," she hissed. "It's a phase, just like all your other whims. You'll burn out. You'll come crawling back." I looked at her, this woman who gave birth to me, who raised me, who spent years trying to mold me into something smaller. And I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. "Maybe," I said. "But if I do fall, it'll be because I took a risk. Not because I hid behind excuses. Not because I tried to tear someone else down to make myself feel better." She turned her back on me, walked into the kitchen. I left without another word, because sometimes the turning point isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, a moment where you stop begging for understanding and start building without it. And from that moment forward, I knew I wasn't just taking back my story. I was going to rewrite hers too, one page at a time. The days after that confrontation were strangely quiet. No calls, no emails, not even a message passed through the family grapevine. And in that silence, I found something I didn't expect. Clarity. For the first time in my life, I stopped trying to win my mother's approval. I stopped editing myself to make her more comfortable. That moment in her living room hadn't healed anything, but it had unlocked something vital, my ability to walk away, and I did. Not just from her, but from every version of myself that needed permission to be enough. With that space came a flood of energy. I threw myself into work, not as a distraction, but as a declaration. I wasn't building this company to prove anything anymore. I was building it because it mattered, because I believed in it, and because, beneath the hurt and betrayal, I was still that little girl behind a lemonade stand. Hungry, bold, fearless. Jordan noticed the shift immediately. We started expanding faster than we anticipated. New clients came in, old clients referred friends. I hired 2 more team members, both women who had left corporate jobs because they were tired of being invisible. I understood that deeply. We were all building something that had never been given to us. We were making our own place at the table. But growth didn't come without pressure. With each new project, expectations grew. There were weeks when I barely slept, when I doubted every creative choice, when I stood in front of whiteboards and questioned whether I was out of my depth. But then something beautiful started happening. My team began stepping up, not just to follow, but to lead. I saw Jordan pitching without looking to me for validation. I saw Maya, our newest hire, take ownership of a campaign concept and defend it with fire. We weren't just a team, we were a movement. Still, beneath that fire, a quiet ember of pain remained. My mother's silence wasn't just a choice, it was a strategy. Her refusal to acknowledge what she'd done was her way of pretending it didn't matter. And as much as I told myself I was past it, there were moments, late at night, driving home from the office, brushing my teeth in the quiet, when her voice would echo in my head, saying I'd burn out, saying I'd come crawling back. And then, one morning, the fire finally caught something real. It was a Saturday. I was sitting on my balcony sipping coffee, catching up on emails when I saw her name in my inbox. Subject line, reunion. The pit in my stomach was instant. I clicked. There was no greeting, no apology, just a request. "I'm planning another family event. Would you be willing to speak about entrepreneurship? I think it would inspire the younger cousins." I stared at the screen, not sure whether to laugh or throw my coffee. This was the same woman who called me unstable, who tried to destroy my reputation with a fake email. Now she wanted me to be a guest speaker at her family showcase? I closed the laptop. I couldn't respond. Not yet. But the thought festered in me for days. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every girl in that family who was watching, every niece or cousin who saw what happened last time and assumed silence was the cost of ambition. So I said yes. But on one condition, I would tell the truth. When I arrived at the event a few weeks later, I was greeted with the same familiar smiles and polite hugs. The tent was smaller this time, fewer guests, But the energy was still the same, warm on the surface, sharp underneath. My mother was wearing a lavender dress and pearls, her armor. She gave me a brief nod when I walked in, and I returned it without a word. They gave me 10 minutes to speak. I took 15. I stood in front of the group, microphone in hand, and told them what no one else ever had the courage to say out loud, that success looks different for everyone, that sometimes the people closest to you won't understand your dreams because they've buried their own, that being underestimated can become your greatest weapon if you learn to wield it with grace, and that silence in the face of sabotage isn't noble, it's surrender. I told them about building my agency, about failure and late nights and self-doubt. I told them about betrayal too, not in detail, but enough that the people who needed to hear it would understand. And I ended with this: if someone tries to dim your light because it makes their shadow look smaller, shine anyway, not to prove them wrong, but to prove yourself right. The applause wasn't thunderous, but it was sincere. I saw something shift in the eyes of my younger cousins, especially the girls. For the first time, I saw them looking at me not as the cautionary tale their parents whispered about, but as a possibility. Afterwards, as the crowd dispersed, I stood alone near the buffet table, sipping water, wondering if my mother would say anything. She didn't. She passed by me once, her expression unreadable. I watched her walk away, and for the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel wounded. I felt complete. Not because she approved, but because I no longer needed her to. 2 days later, I received another package. This time, it was a journal, old, leather-bound, with my mother's initials engraved on the spine. Inside were pages filled with entries, some dating back to before I was born, her dreams, her plans, her heartbreaks. I sat on my bed, reading page after page, and for the first time, I saw her not as a villain, but as a woman who had dreams once, who had been taught to shrink herself, who had passed that bitterness down to me like a family heirloom. One entry stood out. It was dated the day I opened my agency. The handwriting was messier than usual, emotional. She did it. She really did it. I wanted to be proud, but all I could feel was fear. What if she doesn't need me? What if she becomes everything I gave up? God, what if she becomes more? I closed the journal and let the tears fall. Not for her, for both of us, for the years we lost, for the damage caused, for the women we could have been to each other if fear hadn't stood in the way. That night I called her. She didn't answer, but I left a voicemail. I got your journal. I'm not ready to forgive you, but I see you now, and maybe that's a start. Then I put the journal on a shelf in my office, next to the lemonade stand photo and our first signed contract. 3 symbols. 1 story. Mine. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had something far more powerful. Clarity, identity, and peace. But little did I know, this wasn't the end. Because just when I thought I'd reclaimed my story completely, the past was about to knock on my door again. And this time, it would come with consequences. 3 weeks passed after I left that voicemail. No reply, no missed calls, no texts, nothing. I had accepted the silence as closure. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a ceasefire. My focus returned to the agency, to the rhythm of deadlines and brainstorming sessions, to the ever-growing to-do list that came with success. We had just landed a new deal with a rising fashion house in Los Angeles, our biggest creative project yet. The team was buzzing, clients were excited, and the media had started to pay attention. SK Strategies wasn't just growing, it was becoming something people in the industry talked about. And in the middle of that whirlwind, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't in a long time: calm, until the letter came. It was a plain white envelope with no return address, slipped through the mail slot at the office. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, no signature. But the message was unmistakably sharp. Success doesn't erase the truth. Dig deeper. You're not the only one who's been lied to. I read the note 3 times before I could even react. My first instinct was to dismiss it as a prank. Maybe someone jealous, someone bitter. But there was something about the tone, the precision of the words, that felt personal, targeted. I showed it to Jordan, who looked as unsettled as I felt. "We've had critics before," he said, "but never anything like this." Someone wants to rattle you. And they had succeeded. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with questions I didn't know how to form, much less answer. Who was this message really from? And what did they mean by dig deeper? The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. I hadn't planned to. I just found myself behind the wheel, steering toward the neighborhood I once called home. When I arrived, the house was quiet. My father was out in the garage, his usual place. My mother wasn't around. I let myself in and stood in the hallway, staring at the family portraits lining the walls. I thought about the journal, the entries, the contradictions, pride hidden beneath fear, love hidden beneath control. And suddenly, I remembered something from years ago, an overheard conversation when I was 16. My mother on the phone late at night, whispering angrily, saying, "She can't know. No one can ever know." At the time, I assumed it was about a family argument. But now those words echoed with a new weight. I went to the study. The door was usually locked, but this time it gave way with a creak. Inside, everything was as pristine as ever. Books lined up alphabetically, papers in tidy stacks, the scent of old paper and lavender still lingering. I sat at the desk and pulled open the drawers. The first was full of bills. The second held envelopes from charity foundations and social clubs. But it was the third that stopped me. Inside were documents. Legal, old, faded from time but intact. I pulled them out slowly, reading each one until I found it. An adoption file. My breath caught in my throat. My name. My birth date. And under birth mother, a name I didn't recognize. I stared at it for so long the letters stopped making sense. The room felt like it was spinning. The truth hit me with the force of a brick wall. I wasn't my mother's biological daughter. I wasn't even part of the family in the way I had always believed. Everything suddenly made a strange kind of sense. The distance, the rejection, the resentment. It wasn't just about control. It was about identity. I had been the shadow of a past she never intended to keep. I heard footsteps in the hallway. My mother appeared at the door, eyes narrowing when she saw the papers in my hands. "You went through my things," she said, voice low. "You lied to me," I whispered. "My entire life." She stepped into the room, calm but tense. "It wasn't a lie. It was a choice. We chose to raise you, to give you a life." I stood, the file shaking in my hands. "You didn't raise me. You tried to erase me. Every time I became something you didn't expect, you punished me for it. And now I know why. I wasn't yours to control." Her expression flickered, just for a moment, with something almost like sadness, but it disappeared just as fast. "You were a secret that became a burden," she said flatly. "Your birth mother was a mistake. A girl from Raleigh who didn't want you. We saved you." I wanted to scream. I wanted to collapse. But instead, I breathed. Deep, steady. "You didn't save me," I said. "You tried to make me disappear." I left the house without another word, clutching the folder like it held my entire identity. In a way, it did. Back at the office, Jordan found me in the conference room, staring blankly at the window. "I found her," he said gently, holding out a piece of paper. "Your birth mother. Her name's Charlotte Whitman. She lives just outside Durham. She's a photographer." I took the paper, my hands trembling. 2 days later, I drove to a small art gallery near downtown Durham. Inside, the walls were lined with black and white photographs, raw, emotional, breathtaking. At the back stood a woman in her late 40s, with sharp cheekbones and long auburn hair pulled into a braid. "Charlotte?" I asked. She turned. Her eyes widened. I didn't have to explain. She knew. We sat on a bench outside the gallery, beneath a canopy of trees. The late afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, casting shadows on our faces. "I thought about you every day," she said, her voice soft. "I was 19, alone. I didn't know how to keep you safe, so I gave you to people who promised they would." "They never told me," I said. "I know. They wanted to rewrite the story." I nodded, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. I just needed to know who I was. She looked at me with a mix of wonder and sorrow. "You're exactly who you were always meant to be." We talked for hours. About art, about mistakes, about second chances. She told me about her life, her regrets, her decision to let me go. And for the first time, I saw my reflection in someone who didn't want to change me, just to know me. When I drove home that night, I didn't feel broken. I felt whole. Not because I had answers, but because I had truth, and the truth had finally set me free. But I wasn't done yet. There was one final chapter still unwritten, and I was ready to close it. My way. The days that followed were surreal. It was like the air around me had changed, like the colors of the world had deepened and everything finally made sense. I was no longer chasing clarity. I was holding it. The image of my mother folding laundry in silence had lost its weight. Her judgments, her manipulations, her silence, they no longer defined me. I had been untethered from her version of the story, and in the quiet space that followed, something remarkable happened. I started hearing my own voice more clearly. I spent more time at the gallery with Charlotte. We didn't try to fast-track a relationship. We weren't pretending to be something we weren't. We were strangers tied by blood and now joined by truth. She told me stories about the photographs she took, portraits of women in motion, children running through fields, elderly hands wrinkled with stories. Her work was about honesty, about catching the moments no one else was watching. I told her that my work was kind of the same. I was learning how to tell truths that people tried to hide behind logos and pretty fonts. And for the first time, someone looked at me and said, without hesitation, "That's a gift, Sam. You're using your voice to wake people up." It made me think about all the times I'd let my mother's disapproval sit louder than my instincts. How many decisions I had questioned. How many parts of myself I had softened just to avoid conflict. But not anymore. Now, every piece of me, every stubborn, dreaming, risk-taking part, was finally standing in the light. Back at SK Strategies, things were changing too. Jordan had started running his own accounts. Our interns had turned into managers. And I was no longer the person trying to prove her legitimacy at the table. I was leading the table. We started getting interview requests. Magazines, podcasts, panels. They wanted to know what we were doing differently, why our campaigns felt so personal. And my answer was always the same. We tell stories that can't be faked. But as everything grew, I felt a tug, an unfinished thread. I had made peace with my past, but I hadn't yet made peace with the damage it left behind. And that damage had a face, a voice, a name. My mother. I didn't want revenge anymore. I didn't want to hurt her or win or prove her wrong. I had already done all of that without even trying. What I wanted was resolution, not for her sake, but for mine. So I invited her to the launch of our new headquarters. It wasn't an olive branch. It was an open door. If she walked through it, I'd know there was a part of her still capable of seeing me for who I really was. And if she didn't, well, then I'd know that too. The event was held on a crisp Saturday afternoon in downtown Raleigh. We had transformed an old brick building into a creative sanctuary. High ceilings, exposed beams, art installations on the walls, warm lighting and soft music humming through the space. Clients mingled with influencers. Local press snapped photos, and my team glowed with pride as they walked friends and guests through every detail we'd built from the ground up. And then, just as I was stepping on stage to give my welcome speech, I saw her, standing near the back of the room in a gray coat, hands clasped in front of her, eyes scanning the space like she wasn't sure where to belong. But she had come. The crowd hushed as I stepped up to the microphone. I didn't have notes. I didn't need them. "Thank you all for being here," I said. "This space represents more than just a business expansion. It's a declaration. That creativity can be powerful, that vision can be louder than tradition, and that sometimes when the world tells you to shrink, you rise instead." I looked directly at her. My story hasn't always been easy. Some of it I didn't even know was mine until recently. But I've learned that truth isn't something you discover once and then carry. It's something you fight to keep living in every day. And this place is our truth, not just mine, but my team's, my clients'. Everyone who ever felt like they didn't quite belong. There was a long pause. And to the person who once said I'd come crawling back, thank you. Because you gave me the fire to stand up. Applause erupted. I stepped off the stage, my heart hammering. I didn't look back to see if she was still there. An hour later, as the event wound down, she found me. "Congratulations, she said. Her voice was quiet, but there was something in it that sounded almost like awe. Thank you, I said. We stood there for a moment, two women who once waged silent wars across dinner tables and family reunions, two women connected by secrets and silence, but now standing in the middle of a space filled with light and sound and truth. I read your speech, she said. In the newsletter. You always had a way with words. I nodded. It took me a long time to realize I could use them for myself. She looked around the room, taking in the art, the people, the pride in the air. You built something beautiful. I didn't respond. I was afraid, she admitted after a beat. Not of you failing, but of you succeeding without needing me. I didn't know how to be part of your world. You could have just tried, I said gently. I know. There was another silence. But this one didn't feel heavy. It felt open. I don't expect forgiveness, she said. I'm not offering it, I replied. But maybe I can offer space, if you're willing to earn it. She nodded slowly. That's fair. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We simply parted ways with something we had never given each other before. Honesty. A few weeks later, I received another envelope. This one wasn't anonymous. It was from a university in Chapel Hill, inviting me to speak at their Women in Business Summit. The topic? Redefining legacy. I smiled at the irony. Legacy used to be something I feared, something that came with rules and shame and generations of pressure. But now I knew better. Legacy is not about what you inherit. It's about what you choose to leave behind. And I was finally ready to leave behind something bold, something true. Something that no one could ever take away from me again. It's been 18 months since the day I stood on that stage and welcomed the world into the space I built from the ground up. A lot has happened since then, some things small and quiet, others seismic and unforgettable, but all of them have pointed in the same direction, forward. I no longer live in fear of being misunderstood. I no longer carry the invisible weight of needing someone else's permission to shine. And perhaps most importantly, I no longer live my life as if I owe anyone an explanation for my existence. I've learned to exist fully, unapologetically, and in color. SK Strategies is no longer just a boutique agency in Raleigh. We opened our second office in Atlanta, and a third is underway in Chicago. What started as a small team of 4 is now a collective of 22 people, each of them handpicked not just for their skill, but for their heart. We've become known for campaigns that feel like stories, that pierce the veil between surface and soul. We work with companies that want to say something real, companies that understand branding isn't about noise, it's about connection. Jordan is now my partner, officially. I signed the papers 6 months ago. It wasn't a difficult decision. He had earned it in every possible way. In the beginning, he was my assistant. Then he became my right hand. And eventually, he became the person I trusted most in this business. Watching him evolve has been one of the greatest privileges of my life. He still brings champagne to our milestones, only now we open it together, with equal ownership of everything we've built. Charlotte, my birth mother, and I see each other regularly. Our relationship is still unfolding, piece by piece, in quiet Sunday brunches and afternoon gallery visits. There are no expectations, no pressure. Just 2 women learning how to share space in each other's lives. A few months ago, she gave me a photograph, one she had taken the year I was born. It's a picture of her sitting on the floor, holding an empty baby blanket. Her eyes are closed. Her head is tilted back toward the light. The caption written on the back simply says, "Choosing Hope." I keep that photo in my bedroom, not because it makes me sad, but because it reminds me of the truth. That love, in all its forms, is rarely clean or easy or predictable. Sometimes it's wrapped in pain. Sometimes it's dressed as silence. But sometimes, even when it's imperfect, it shows up anyway. My relationship with my mother, the woman who raised me, is different. We're not close. There's no magical transformation, no Hollywood ending where she becomes my biggest cheerleader overnight. But we speak, occasionally, gently. She asks about work sometimes, and I answer. She came to our holiday party last December and brought lemon cookies I used to love as a child. We sat on opposite ends of the room, exchanging polite smiles. That might be all we ever are, and I'm learning to be okay with that. Because closure, I've found, doesn't always come with clarity. Sometimes it comes with distance. Sometimes it comes with setting a boundary and honoring it, even when it hurts. And sometimes it comes from building a life so full of love and meaning that the absence no longer feels like a wound. There are still moments, even now, when something small will trigger an old ache, a phrase, a smell, a memory. I'll hear someone say, "She's just going through a phase," and I'll feel the burn of that old humiliation at the family reunion. But then I'll look around and realize I'm not there anymore. I'm not standing on that patio, choking on silence while the people around me laugh at a version of me that never existed. I'm here, in my office, with my team, with my truth, and I'm thriving. A few weeks ago, I was asked to give a commencement speech at a local college. The students were all business majors, full of ambition and fear and possibility. I stood in front of them and told them everything I wished someone had told me at that age. I told them that people will try to define them by what's easy to understand, that not everyone will cheer for them when they grow, that some people, even those who claim to love them, will quietly root for their failure, not because they're evil, but because their success will force others to confront their own compromises. And I told them this: do it anyway. Dream louder. Stand taller. Build what they say can't be built. And when someone calls your vision a phase, smile and keep building. Afterward, one student came up to me with tears in her eyes. She said, "My mom doesn't believe in what I want to do, but after hearing you, I know I can still make it happen." I hugged her, and in that hug, I felt something shift again, because maybe that's what all of this has been about. Not just reclaiming my voice, but giving others permission to use theirs. So here I am, Samantha Keller, adopted, dismissed, underestimated, then underestimated again. Now co-founder of a national brand agency, daughter of 2 women, one who gave me life and one who gave me limits. And I needed both, because without the fire, I might never have risen. Without the silence, I might never have learned to speak. Without the lies, I might never have dug for the truth. And without that moment, standing on a family deck with my assistant walking in holding champagne, I might never have realized just how powerful I truly was. They tried to write my story for me, but I took the pen back, and I wrote every chapter myself, on my terms. For anyone out there still living under the weight of someone else's expectations, this is your sign. Your story matters. Pick up the pen and begin. Have you ever had someone in your own family try to erase your truth just because they couldn't control it? Leave a comment below and share your experience. If this story touched something deep inside you, please like and subscribe. There are so many people out there hiding their light just to feel accepted. But I want to remind you, your voice matters, and your truth deserves to be heard. Share this with someone who's ready to reclaim their story. And always remember, some of the most powerful transformations begin when we stop asking for permission and start writing our own chapters. Thank you for listening to my story.